Welcome to Two Deep, Hokies Under the Influence, brought to you by McCoy's Auto Repair in Radford, Virginia. This is the Sons of Saturday podcast, and I'm your host, Pete B. You know my co-host, Rob. Rob, how you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm good. Not great from the game, but I'm having a good week, man. So we're getting to the tail end of it, and I'm not relieved, but there's a little bit of weight being lifted off my shoulders
It's,
after you get
it's
after you
every
get
year, man.
11 weeks into recording, and it takes a toll on you.
It really does. And I think I was talking to my wife or somebody like 10 days out from the UVA game is like when I hit that point where I'm just like, oh my gosh, we got 2 games left. And it depends on how the season's going too, in
Yes.
terms of like how it's wearing on you. But Virginia Tech did lose to NC State 35-28. Why don't you give us a cheers and we'll get going on this podcast?
I will. I'll give a cheers to the team not giving up. So how about that? It was not a great performance. We're going to go through some of the challenges that the team had on both sides of the ball, and but I was surprised they got it back to a touchdown game. I thought there were places that they really could have let that thing go. So cheers to kind of sticking with it and seeing the game through.
Cheers. Do you like that tall glass of black I'm having here?
Whoa,
And
whoa!
it
Is that a
it
Coke
it
or a
it
Guinness?
it is in a Guinness glass, but I'm just using it as a stout glass because it's a holiday stout, which I will talk
Ooh.
about a little bit later because we are nearing Thanksgiving. We're recording a night early. We're doing Tuesday night because Thanksgiving is on Thursday, and if we put this out any later in the week, no one's going to listen to it. So we got to
They
get
may
it
not
out.
listen to it anyway. So
We got to get it out as soon as possible. Let's start with just a couple of basketball notes as we have the last couple of weeks. The men's team beat Wofford 98-76. Kid had 20 points and continues to look great ever since I interviewed him in the
ever
offseason.
since you're just the lucky charm, I guess.
I
It's
guess so. I guess when he stood next to me, he just felt like a better man, and it's translated to the court. He was 8 for 8 on his free throws, so he had the 20 points. But a big man making his free throws, you always like to see that. Padula had
Yep.
19, Couture had 17, Nickel had 14, and 98. We had 100 not too long before that. So
Yeah.
the team's offensive output and efficiency has looked pretty good. It's the defense, again, that seems to be a sore spot. We're going to learn a lot about this team coming up because we play Boise State on Thanksgiving night at 8 p.m. on ESPN2. So make sure after you've had your post-dinner nap, you're ready to watch some Hokie hoops because it's the ESPN Events Invitational down in Florida. And then we'll play one of Iowa State or VCU on Friday. And then there's either the third place or the championship on Sunday. So there's a bunch of games coming up, but it doesn't end there because there's Auburn. We're going to Auburn on the 29th. And then we have an ACC game against Louisville on the 3rd. So it's starting to get going here, man.
Real quick, things got serious very fast. That's awesome. On Thursday, you will have already been drinking. You will already have eaten, gone comatose, and now you can kind of catch your second wave of a booze evening with the Hokies and back
The
Hokies
the
basketball.
game's gonna feel like a fever dream. Like
Yes,
a
that's
little bit of wine, a little bit of tryptophan. You're not gonna really know what you're watching. It's just Lynn Kidd and Padula
yeah.
running down the court. But yeah, the women, on the other hand, have kept winning since the Iowa game as well. Well, not on the other hand. Both teams are winning. A little bit different ways of going about it because the women absolutely destroyed one of the teams they played. I forget the name of that one. But the most recent game was UNC Greensboro, and Kitley had 31 and 10. And she's just so darn good. And Amore too. I think Amore in the other game kind of went off, but I haven't really done the tearing into b-ball quite yet, other than watching the games themselves.
Right.
But if you want coverage on that, Ed and Mike McDaniel are doing a tremendous job on the Sons of Saturday channel with all the Hokie Hoops pods. They'll get you up to date on both teams.
Love it.
Okay, Rob, are you ready for some playoff ranking reaction? Because they just came out about a half hour ago.
Wow.
And you'll notice that Washington has moved into number 4. As we thought might happen last week, it happened this week.
I know. I wished it into existence. If only I could wish a win to Virginia Tech's existence. Yeah, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and Washington, with Ohio State and Michigan playing this upcoming weekend.
Yeah.
What a show.
It's going to be great. The game is going to be awesome, probably stressful, but has your mind changed at all on how that game will play out based on what Michigan did this past weekend and how they've looked without Harbaugh?
I don't. I think my mind is starting to change as Ohio State has started to really roll now. I think that's where my mind is maybe starting to change. I think it's going to be a very good game. I think this is going to be a fourth quarter kind of, close game right to the end. And mostly because I think Ohio State has elevated, and some may be questioning, Michigan at this point without Harbaugh and the distractions off the field. It's not just Harbaugh; it's the distractions of all of this. There's no way to tune that out with how much commentary has been going on with this shit show that they've really, that has come to light, I guess is the best way to put it. So I guess maybe Michigan coming down a little bit, Ohio State coming up, but I would peg them, pretty much equals, right, going into the game this weekend.
So the line is Michigan 3.5. And the sign stealing stuff, has that affected the way you perceive Michigan? Do you think them potentially not having Ohio State signs affects the way you think about the game?
Oh, no, absolutely.
Okay. I wouldn't think so. I just was curious.
No.
I do have concerns that Harbaugh just not being on the sidelines doesn't maximize their ability.
Right.
I mean, I feel like a coach as good as Harbaugh has an effect on game day, and merely taking him out, you can't just dismiss it. But I would have said maybe a month ago, Michigan wins by 7 or 10.
Right.
Now I'm debating on whether I should take Ohio State in the hook. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All of this ends up being commentary after the game. If Michigan doesn't win, or they don't look on point, everybody's going to say it was because Harbaugh wasn't there. If they do, then it's going to say, oh, the players really got up and played for Harbaugh. It doesn't matter. It's all hindsight is 2020 bullshit anyway. We have no clue. But you have to put some value on having Harbaugh on that sideline, and similarly detract some value by him, not being there, and the distractions have to take a little bit of your edge off. So I that's part of my calculus in thinking that this is a really squared up matchup. The 3.5, quite honestly, seems a little bit big. I couldn't pick this game one way or the other, honestly.
I really hope that it's not a tight game, because I do not want this. If there's a little bit of chaos, I do not want both of these teams getting in. That's what,
I agree.
As just a college football playoff and college football fan, I don't want to see both Michigan and Ohio State in there, because then, what's the point of this game? You know what I'm saying?
Right. So, and the scenario you're talking about is either Florida State or Washington taking an L. I don't think that it could happen to Georgia, but I don't think we really are counting on that. You would probably see Florida State or Washington taking the loss, and then Ohio State and Michigan both getting in,
because
that is a disaster.
We'll move to the ACC teams now, and this is where the ACC is not getting any respect. Florida, the worst ranked undefeated P5 team. Louisville, the worst ranked 1-loss P5 team. NC State, the worst ranked 3-loss P5 team. The only thing that gave the ACC any respect is that Clemson is in this ranking. And I said on Monday that I thought Clemson might have deserved to be ranked in the AP, and they were maybe 3 or 4 spots out. But the committee did put them in here because there's no JMU and there's no Toledo in this ranking. And so we've got Tulane as a G5 at number 23, and we got Liberty as a G5 at number 25. And if we want to just talk about the New Year's Six for a minute, the highest ranked G5 gets in the New Year's Six. Well, Liberty has a real shot because Tulane's got to play UTSA this weekend. And then they got to play the AAC championship game against probably SMU.
Yeah.
And so
and SMU's rolling.
SMU's playing well, but like SMU's not in this poll. So like if SMU beats Navy and then they beat Tulane, will they hop Liberty if Liberty's undefeated? Because Liberty has UTEP, who stinks, but then they have New Mexico State, Jerry Kill, who has like an 8-3 or 9-3 team right now. So it's going to be fascinating to see who comes out of the G5 in the next couple of weeks.
I think if Tulane takes a loss, I think Liberty controls its own destiny at that point. I think it's going to be very hard for somebody to leap them up, because if they rattle off another win, Tulane takes a loss, you're probably going to see them like right around 20.
Yeah, because other teams are going to catch losses. You're saying,
correct?
Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. Just by the very nature of.
And for people who aren't watching on YouTube, you'll see that Mizzou is in front of Louisville. So you've got a 2-loss Mizzou in front of a 1-loss Louisville. And I've kind of liked Mizzou all year. I know you have too, so I don't have a big problem with that. They probably are better than Louisville, but like if I'm a Louisville fan, I'd be like, what the heck? Well, the answer to that is don't lose to Pitt.
that is exactly what that is not a good loss.
No, it's one of the, if not the worst loss on the board, it's one of them.
Yep.
All right, let's move to the depth chart injury update for Virginia Tech. Stroman was kind of laboring in the game, as was Fuga. Kelly Lawson left the game with an injury, and he is questionable for this week. Other players that had blue non-contact jerseys were some of the safeties. We had Peoples, we had Stroman, we had Jones, and then Canteen and Phillips were running with the ones in their place. And so I'm hoping one or all of those safeties are back. Like at least, I mean, we want Stroman back, obviously.
Yes.
We want Peoples back. Those are our starting guys. But as many of them that I can get is what I'll take.
Yeah. I don't think it's just want them back. I think we really could need them back. In what we just saw in the outing this past weekend, the defense is susceptible, and I think we've seen that. So I'm not saying we have to be full strength, but we got to be pretty darn close. In this matchup coming into the weekend.
Pick'em leaders, some spread, still in front, 74-46. He is 5 wins in front of Tech Triumph and Hokie Hustler. And so some spread it's looking pretty good. I don't know how many weeks we're going to go. Like if we'll probably do championship game weekend. It's up to ESPN, not me. I haven't looked at like what the final week is, but I would imagine it's championship game week. So we got 2 more weeks left essentially. So some spread he's looking pretty good. He just don't have a 2-8 week and you'll be good to go.
Yeah.
I did want to mention Friday Night Lights, the event at Tots this past Friday.
Yeah.
It was really fun, and it was kind of just one piece of what went on all weekend, because my wife and I stopped at JMU Thursday night to break up the drive, and we had that plan long before game day was ever going to be in town. But it worked out really well because we woke up, we met up with Dan from Tales of the Terror Dome. We watched the Pat McAfee show, like the first hour and a half with Kurt Signetti, the coach of JMU, was on there. They had some other people roll through. Pat McAfee eviscerated the NCAA for virtually the entire thing.
Yep.
Had no qualms, even being on ESPN, proud partner of a lot of the things the NCAA does. He was just ripping them a new one. So that was really fun to see. And the crowd was fantastic. And it was a great weekend for JMU. They did not get the win versus App State. And we had talked, didn't we say like, it's a lot of pressure?
It is a lot of pressure. And my wife was like, App State always pulls those types of upsets. And I said, well, listen, JMU App State has become a rivalry, that game, because they have been going up against each other at the conference below for so long. So that's become a really big game. But yes, it still was, an upset given how JMU's season has played out this year.
I got a little sidetracked because they started with Friday Night Lights because Dan was the first person I saw that weekend. But on Friday night, I saw Barrick and Clark and and Devin, who co-hosted the pod with you several years back.
Yep.
Fritz, there was a guy named Andy, a guy named Brendan, just people that were listeners of the pod that came up and said, I love what you and Robbie do. You got to get Robbie down here next time, all that kind of stuff. People were asking for you. Some other names, Andrew and Sarah Berlin, I saw at the tailgate. Just happened to see them walking through Lytton Reeves. We hung out for a bit. I always seem to run it. Whenever they're at a game, I usually end up seeing them. I think I got just about, and of course, Hokie Hack, who is a caller. I kept seeing Hack everywhere I went. Whether it was at Todd's, it was in the parking lots, it was in the stadium. Like I'm in the south end zone, I'm walking to get like a beer or something. There he is. Like I just kept seeing him, and you're going to hear him in the calls as you do normally every week. So it was a fantastic weekend. And and I also hung out with Andrew Alex from the Hokie Hangover pod at Champs. Happened to see him. He's kind of a recognizable guy with the jet of colored hair. He's got his red hair, and spotted him. We chatted for a long time and had a good convo. Brian Holbrook, who is always commenting on Twitter and a listener of the pod for a long time, chatted with him a lot. And we actually talked a lot about just like the team makeup. And he was just like, man, if we could just get a center and we could move Caden over to guard, and he was going through all the meat and potatoes of everything, which I love, and he's the one that's always been going back and forth with us about talent problem, coaching problem kind of stuff. Yes. So it was a lot of fun to see so many people. And I was with a ton of my friends celebrating my friend Emmy's birthday. So all of us just had an absolute blast. And today is actually my friend Nicole's birthday, who you know, Rob.
Yes.
So it's kind of
both of them.
Yeah. You've been at some of those celebrations over the years. So great weekend in the Berg, great weather. I wish the game had gone better, but let's get into that game recap. 0-0 through the first quarter. Starting in the second quarter, NC State scored 5 touchdowns on 5 straight possessions.
Yes.
It was 21-7 at the half, and 21 alone was disappointing with the way NC State's offense had looked all year. Yeah. But it got to 35-14 before we finally put up a couple more scores. Felton had the 42-yarder. He added another one later to cut it to 35-21. And with 1:40 left, we scored with the pass to Gosnell to make it a 1-score game. But to me, it never really felt like we were going to come back. And it ended 35-28. Is that how you were feeling?
It felt dead even before that a little bit. It seemed like a bridge too far in the way that our offense was operating and their defense was operating in the way that our offense chose to go, which we'll get into the details of. But I would agree. We were down 14. It looked closer. I look at this as kind of a 14-point loss. I know it was 7 points on the board, but that's how it felt.
Yeah. Well, let's get to the best part of the pod, and that is the calls.
Hey, Too Deep. I'm kind of worried here. I have a sneaking suspicion that someone needs to check on Robbie's fish.
I'm hurting this Sunday. I am hurting. It feels like 2012, 2014, and 2015.
Yeah, does it feel like Groundhog Day? Is this just life? Do we always have to go into the UVA game having to win it?
This is their Super Bowl. This is the game they care about.
Can't we just go in there and cruise? No, we gotta save the season. That's what we intend to do because we do it all the time.
But you know what? We're going to bring a lot of Hokies. We're going to turn the Fontaine lot into Chicken Hill North. And we're just going to have a fun time.
Why not us? Go Hokies.
If you were listening to the beginning of those calls, you heard the mention of Robbie's fish. Hopefully you heard last week's episode when Robbie explained the sick fish that his daughter has in his bedroom. What's the update on the fish?
The fish is alive. This thing... So I can't make this up. The fish outlast our ACC hopes. So it's still alive. My wife has been giving baths. Evidently, we think that it has fish bloat or something like that, which is basically like fish constipation from eating too much, right? Which is actually very deadly for fish. So she has been giving the fish daily Epsom salt baths, which is supposed to be a laxative for fishes. I can't make this up. Okay, so she did it last night. She takes the fish out, does it. She like pours the water out and then drops the fish back in. The fish proceeds to sink all the way and then like land on top of, we have like one of those little caves, that in the fish tank. It just lands on the top of like the coral cave and then just tips over and just lays on its side for like the next 6 hours. It just, you can just barely see its lungs breathing. It feels like torture.
Right.
I can't take it anymore. I don't know what to, if we've thought about, we're like, what's a humane way to kill the fish at this point? Do we like just leave it out of the water and just let it like,
Buried in the
suffocate, I guess, and
backyard.
die? Bury it, flush it down the toilet again, smash it with the hammer idea. I don't know. It's still alive as of 1 hour ago. We checked on it before we put my daughter to bed.
Well, maybe that fish was not a metaphor for our ACC hopes, but for our bowl hopes.
Oh no, that could be it. I guess we'll know on Saturday. So it'll be like in the movies, like when the person like dies at the same time that like something else in the movie happens, like the timing like all coincides, and the person's like last gasp of breath is at like the time something else in the universe is occurring. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Gosh, either that or maybe it starts swimming around as soon as but Bayshaw runs in a winning score or something.
Yeah, it's either that or it takes a massive dump and all of a sudden it's better. All of the bloat that it has, and it's a nightmare. It's so bad.
I'm sure no one wants to hear any more about the fish, but I personally thought it was hilarious. So wanted to squeeze that in there. If you want to call the reaction line, you can hit us up. It's 540-251-2169 during the UVA game to give us all of your reactions. Next week, Robbie will give you a final update on that fish.
I hope it's the final update. Please, God.
All right. Two Deep Hokies Under the Influence is brought to you by McCoy's Auto Repair in Radford. I said it at the top of the show. They sponsor this podcast, and they've been around since 1980. It's a local family-owned and operating business, and we love to support a business like that. They offer full service, major and minor repairs. They can fix your engine. They can rebuild your transmission. They do oil changes, state inspections, diesel repair, fleet service, everything. They also sell tires, perfect for the winter, and they have that optional pickup and drop off if you just can't get to the shop from work. So head to McCoy's Auto Repair for all of your vehicle maintenance needs, or give them a call, 540-639-2933. Number is right on the screen, 540-639-2933, and you can also find them on Facebook. Just like that old Hokie buddy of yours, McCoy's is a name you can trust. What was your story of the game, Rob?
I said going into the game, I was interested to see how we attacked this defense. I think we talked about that. What I didn't expect to see was us throwing it 30 times and then running it 16 times in the game. The 16 number was very low in my takeaway. That was far and away kind of my biggest takeaway of this game.
Was just that the offensive identity wasn't there.
Yeah, it never clicked. It never came together. I actually think that Kyron Jerones took a step forward, a leap forward in this game. Surprisingly, I know that sounds weird to say, but I think
I want to hear some expansion on that a little bit later.
Yeah, but otherwise, it just seemed strange.
My story was that the VT defense stunk, and NC State was just the much better overall team. Like legitimately just team, because going into that game, we thought the offense would struggle because their offense has struggled most of the season, whether it was Brennan Armstrong at quarterback or MJ Morris at quarterback. Well, they didn't show any signs of struggling. I mean, maybe the first quarter for a bit, we were able to hold them down.
Yeah.
But when you score 5 touchdowns on 5 straight drives, there's not much struggle there. And I thought we did just about everything we couldn't do and everything wrong that we shouldn't have in terms of coverage, in terms of gap fits for those 2 quarters that they put up all of those points.
Yeah.
let's start with since you mentioned the drones thing, let's start with our offense.
Yeah.
Because I kind of railed on the defense on Monday. Like that was kind of my bigger first reaction was that, gosh, the defense just didn't give us a chance. But you could make the argument that 35 yards on our first 4 drives and scoring very quickly with one play kind of hung our defense out to dry.
Yeah, that gasses people. To your point, we talked about how many plays each team ran a week prior in that BC when the script got flipped. So they ran 66 plays, we ran 46 plays, 20 more plays. I mean, that is 33-ish% more plays than we ran is incredible. That is a huge number and discrepancy. And that's because we were 1 for 7 on third down. It came back again and it ate us alive. We were 1 for 7 and we never could establish the run. It started with Kyron Jones running for his life again and having to get out of the pocket, which totally caused things to break down. And we never found the rhythm of getting the ball to Tootin or Thomas or anybody. And Jones ended up 17 for 30 with 225 yards, 3 touchdowns and an interception. 2 of those touchdowns came late. And he rushed for 51 yards, and that led the team 51 yards of all the running back or people that ran the ball, 51 yards. And Xavier Turner Bradshaw had 47. That was all in one play.
Right.
So it was really, take that off the board. And I'm not discrediting the play and the play call. It was an amazing play, but in terms of showing what the performance was for the day, that is an anomaly stat that I take out of the rushing performance. And it was piss poor all day outside of that one run.
And we had mentioned, you talked about the plays, the pass attempts, and I had specifically mentioned if we get above 25 pass attempts, it means the run's either not working or we're not attempting to establish it.
Yeah.
Or we're having to come back from a big deficit was the third one I didn't even mention, but all of them came into play. And just 2 carries for Tootin was the thing that really stands out when you look at this sheet, and 1 carry for Thomas. There was maybe another couple touches in there, but you should have those 2 guys with 3 carries on the first 4 drives alone before even NC State got up at all. We should have had those guys with more than 3 carries because that's all they had for the game combined, our 1A and our 1B. And I know some of it is Drones has the ability to give or take on some of those options, right?
Yep.
And he did take a few times, but so maybe you give 2, so 3 carries. So we're going to go with 3 carries. We never tried. And I know we did get down, but we didn't start down. There was a whole quarter that it was 0-0. And then, we were down 7-0. We were down 14-7. There were opportunities to give Tootin the ball. There was some situational stuff because we scored on one play, and I get all of that. But it's just I think Treadmill Horse said it on Twitter, that's malpractice. I don't know if he's banged up. I kind of don't think he's banged up because he looked pissed off during the game on the sideline. So you can't do that. He's our best player, basically. You can't do that.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. So everything you said is accurate. When we did get down and we started to have to pass the ball, Drones threw some nice passes in this game. He threw some from the pocket. I think his pocket presence towards the end of the game was a lot more aware. We hadn't seen a lot of him throwing from there. Most of his throws really throughout the season have been on the run and him being mobile in the backfield. So I thought that he had an okay day for having to throw the ball 30 times when that is certainly not a strength of his. I thought Felton continued to make his presence felt. 7 catches, 87 yards. He had 2 touchdowns, like the one that you mentioned. Lane had 4 catches for 66 yards. So yes, we should not have been running so little and passing so much. For having passed as much as we did, it looked okay. I thought it could have looked a lot worse is kind of my takeaway on how they executed what they decided to go with. I don't agree with them actually going that direction though.
Yeah, out of necessity later in the game, drones and the wide receivers were absolutely able to do some things that made it look a lot more respectable. And you could say, well, NC State took their foot off the gas, which they did. They absolutely did to a point. They're trying to kill the clock and get out of there. But we scored. Like we moved the ball. We had a 10-play drive. The funny part is the other scoring drives were like 1 play, 2 plays, 4 plays, and then there was a 10-play drive in there. But you're right. There were some nice throws. At this point, when you're down by like that and it looks like you're going to lose the game anyway, I almost want to get drones throwing the football to give them some reps in that regard. I'm not saying I'm trying to use the game as practice because there was a chance we could have came back as low as percentage as that was. But he had 276 total yards at the end of the game and 3 touchdowns. He had the 1 pick, which came in between a couple of touchdowns, but the final numbers looked a lot better than they could have. Correct. And that's a credit to the guys not giving up and keep going out there and fighting. And so I will take away as a positive from what was an otherwise kind of miserable day. And that brings me to the defense. And the start for the defense was okay. And the other okay thing is that we got 8 tackles for loss, which I still don't know where all of those were because I didn't see them. And maybe they were later when NC State was kind of sitting on it. But otherwise, Armstrong and Concepcion were doing whatever they wanted.
Yeah, two players destroyed us. It was Armstrong and Concepcion. That was it. NC State rushed the ball 47 times in this game. Granted, like you said, a lot of that was towards the end when they were trying to just sit on it and eat up clock. 4 yards per rush on that. Brennan Armstrong, we let this dude throw for 2 touchdowns, rush for 2 more. We gave up 18 of 26 to him for 203 yards passing and another 90 yards on the ground. It just, and then between him, Concepcion had 44 yards rushing and 63 yards receiving. I guess you could say 3 players killed us. Or 4: Armstrong throwing, Armstrong running, Concepcion running, and then Concepcion catching the ball. It was just that was it. And so painful and so frustrating. And then I heard a lot of people chirping about the zone defense when we spent all week talking about, how our man-to-man is really good. And then we just went out there and played.
French was losing his mind on Twitter and whatnot, because there was way too much zone. 408 yards allowed total, which is not good against what this offense had been putting up. And I will give Armstrong credit because this was probably the best game he played since 2021. Like there could be one that slips in there, but from just an overall performance, doing what he needed to do to get his team the victory, it was outstanding. And so good for him, bad for us, because we really let him do it. And I said on Monday, there's no good way to put this, but Marv got just owned. He got destroyed in this game. Absolutely carved up by Robert and I and whoever else is helping out on that offense.
I would agree. They schemed us up perfectly to mitigate most of our most impactful playmakers on defense. They schemed around it. That's exactly what they did, and it worked. So
the front 7, despite having all those tackles for loss, were pretty awful in the second and third quarter. I mean, and they were worn down. As we said, the offense was not on the field enough in the first half. And it didn't go well later in the game or in that middle portion of the game. We needed a turnover or 2. I kind of thought that going into it. I kept saying it when I'm watching the game in the stands. I was like, we need a turnover here. It never came, and we can never kind of stem the tide there. As far as positive takeaways for the defense, I thought Jenkins was okay, in tackling and run support kind of stuff. He had 8 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. And there were 2 tackles for loss for Pollard and our 1 sack. We did have some pretty decent pressure on Armstrong at times, but he's such a gifted runner that he was getting away from, he's hard to bring down. He's like Tebow-esque. Like that's what it was kind of reminding me of.
Yeah, I would agree. And the pressure is good, but you just got to bring it home. I mean, it was one at the end. It was one sack in the game. Yeah, and that's great that we were getting pressure on him, but you end up getting one sack out of all that pressure, and you got to bring people down to the ground. You got to finish it and turn that pressure into real negative yards for them and get them really behind the chains. And
Right.
that didn't come into fruition.
They always had 4 yards. It just like it felt like every single play they were like, oh, it's 2nd and 6, it's 2nd and 3. Like they were just constantly ahead of the chains. As far as special teams went, Tootin had that nice return, correct?
Yep, 50
So
yards.
That was a highlight, I suppose, and just proves all the more reason you got to get him the ball, because when he touches the ball, good things tend to happen.
Yep.
Do you remember 2 years ago? We go down to Miami. I think Connor Blumrick was our starting quarterback in that rainstorm. And we were recording after the game, and we're looking at the stat sheet. And Raheem Blackshear, who was one of our best players that year, had 2 carries in the game. And we're like, what the heck are you doing only getting Raheem 2 carries? Well, the very next week against UVA, he had the best game of his career.
Yeah.
With like 160 yards on a bunch of touches. So let's hope that, that frustration from Tootin and Pry looking at what happened is like, this isn't happening again. Because a similar thing happened against Marshall, right? Like, didn't we have this earlier in the year?
Yeah. And it kind of makes, first of all, it shouldn't happen this way, just so I'm not advocating for this, but it makes sense because Tootin's pissed, right? Like that dude is going to be spending all week, like, get me the effing ball. Like I want the freaking ball. So I would not be surprised to see him like break out something in like the first quarter and like get like a really long run or even run one out for like a touchdown or something like that. Just that pent up energy of like, fine, you guys don't want to like give me the ball. When I get it, I'm going to make the most of it. Fine. Like, and then they'll start feeding it to him this week, obviously, as a complete like flip from what happened last week. But I could absolutely see a similar situation playing out.
Yeah, it's funny how this season has gone, because we said, this game was the opposite of this game, and then the Syracuse game and the Louisville game, and the opposite of the BC game was this game. And so with the way our season has played out, Tootin having a poor performance this week, the defense having a poor performance this week, God willing, we can get one more week of the flip-flop, because that's what we need. My other takeaways from the game would just be that I give them credit for fighting back. Prize teams tend to fight. They do tend to fight, as he's been here as the head coach, even if we're losing.
Yep. I agree.
The defensive scheme and effort was bad. I just thought we attacked it all of the wrong way. And I'm no genius to tell you how we should have done it differently. It just didn't look right, and it didn't work. So whatever they did was pretty wrong. The offense was lifeless for a while. They came on late, which was good to see. And it was just really disappointing to have bowl eligibility on the line on a beautiful senior day and just play like that for the first half. That was
at home.
That was the real kind of like bummer of it all. It's like, how do you come up? We played so well at home this year for the most part. Like, what happened? Why?
I will never know. These things. It's set up for a situation where you would want to have a really good night, and we just didn't have it. We didn't have it, and it was not schemed very well, both on both sides of the ball. I don't, like you said, I don't know what the solution necessarily is. We threw out some ideas here of some things that didn't look right, but it obviously was wrong, because NC State, do you look at this game and think that they all of a sudden have like a great offense? No, I don't. It's not even close. I mean, the stats.
They played a really good game, and they schemed a really good game, and we schemed a bad game. And we couldn't adjust enough or adjust quickly enough, because that score before the half was just devastating. Like, that was absolutely crushing, because we had just, got the long TD or whatever. But All right, before we move to UVA, I want to tell you that Two Deep Hokies Under the Influence is brought to you by Roback. Roback is a performance activewear designed for those who crave activity. It's the same polo company that had the Commonwealth. That's the white polo with the maroon Virginias. And it's a shirt Robbie and I are both proud to own. And it makes a lot of sense this week. With the Commonwealth Cup coming up, get yourself the Commonwealth shirt. They also have the Berg, which is the quarter zip maroon with little two-tone maroon Virginias on there. Beautiful stuff. Christmas is coming. Black Friday is coming.
Ooh.
There's going to be deals. There's going to be new selections at Roback. They've got tons of good stuff. Hoodies, tees, quarter zips, shorts, joggers, and of course, those polos. So go to their site and load up your cart and use code 2DEEPVT. They're offering our listeners 20% off if you use the code 2DEEPVT. So go ahead and use it. If you've already used it, maybe you tell your mom to use it. Maybe you tell your brother to use it because they're going to get that 20% off too.
Yep.
So go to their site and do your thing. Roback Crave Activity. Right now, Rob, I need to know if you're drinking anything over there.
I am not. I've got green tea tonight, so that's what I'm rolling with. So I'm interested to see what you have going on.
Are you ready for this?
I'm ready. Oh, wow. You brought it out.
It's GBS.
That time. The GBS. Wow.
And I know it is pre-Thanksgiving, but the gingerbread stout, it works. We're close enough to Thanksgiving, just 2 days away here for me to do the GBS. And it pours dark. It pours smooth. This is not this year's edition. I don't even think it's last year's edition. I think it might be 2 years old because
it's aged.
Yeah, you can save these things.
Yes.
And they stay good, man. This thing is
they get better.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, if you get, especially if you go out and get like a Kentucky bourbon stout and or one of those from Hardywood, throw that thing in your cellar, forget about it for a couple of years, and you will be loving life even more than you normally would with any of the GBS or the Bourbon County, any of those.
I've got a Christmas morning in my fridge.
Ooh.
Not the Kentucky, but just a traditional. I am going to go searching. There is one store not too far from me that gets the Kentucky Christmas morning that I'm going to have to go see if they've gotten it in yet.
Give your wife your keys whenever you have that thing because it will knock you on your ass. It is. I think it's like, I don't know. It's like over 10%, and it's
I think
it's a bomber bottle. It'll take you
like
out.
10 or 11, something like that.
Yeah.
This one is 9.2. It's an imperial milk stout with cinnamon, vanilla, ginger, and honey. Yes, that sounds like a lot of stuff, but all of those flavors mesh together quite well. And it says this was canned on 9/22/2021.
Wow.
So it is over 2 years old, but it tastes absolutely phenomenal. I've got it in the Guinness glass, and we ragged on Hardywood a little bit for their Fighting Hokies lager. This is probably the best thing that they do. Other than I know some of my boys will say the Kentucky Christmas morning is better from a wider panel of people. I think people just love the GBS, and it's usually phenomenal.
Yeah, some people don't like the Kentucky because it is a hefty hefty drink. I remember
that first sip is always like, whoa.
Well, yeah, and that Kentucky bourbon hits you like when you taste it, you're like, woof, okay, I guess it's the holiday season because I'm not gonna be able to see straight.
Yeah. And I also felt that just doing a Hardywood, a Virginia beer, was appropriate for the Commonwealth Clash. If you look behind me, if you're watching, I've got our state flag draped over the beanbag back here.
Ooh, I like
bird sitting on top. I was showing that on College Football Monday a couple times. I am ready for this, Rob. I am so ready for the UVA game. I said on Monday it's going to be a 3.5 hour stomach ache, but I don't care because I need to see it. I can't wait to see how we show up, and I want to beat them so bad. 11:25, 3:30 p.m. on ACC Network. Lane Stadium North is the venue. Mm-hmm. And I know that Hack said there's going to be a lot of Hokies there. I know there's going to be a lot of Hokies there. And I can't wait to see you guys show out on Saturday.
It's always a packed house, and it always pisses off the UVA fans with how many Hokies show up. It never gets old. I love it every single time.
And it's even like a little extra special this year because we missed it last year.
Yep. Yeah, we didn't play
get
because of the the Charlottesville stuff that
the
went down.
tragedy that went down
Mhm.
at UVA.
Mhm.
May those players rest in peace. But
Mhm.
we missed the game. They canceled the game, which was appropriate. But we're getting it back, and I would bet maybe yeah, I'm sure they've done this, but there's probably going to be some kind of ceremony or
Yes,
something, right? Like
certainly. Yes, they
I would
will.
think so.
Yeah, I would absolutely think so because I think if they were going to do something, my guess would be if UVA was going to do something this year, they would do it for this game. So
Yeah.
yeah, as like a memorial moment or whatever the case may be.
They are coached by Tony Elliott. He is 6-15 in year 2. This year they are 3-8. They have wins over William and Mary, UNC, and Duke. And they notably beat UNC when they were a top 10 team.
Yeah.
UNC is no longer a top 10 team.
That's right.
Yeah, and I'll give UVA credit for knocking them off that perch, but UNC might have been slightly fraudulent at the time of that game taking place. It's been a reasonably tough schedule for them. It depends on where you look because some of the places have it pretty close to our strength of schedule. Other places have them way higher. They played Tennessee, they
Yep.
played JMU, and they lost by 1. And JMU was an undefeated team until last week. And they lost at Maryland in that game where Calandria threw a bunch of picks in a row. So their out of conference was pretty challenging, save for William and Mary. And if you want to go through the computer rankings, I got them at 92 in Collie, 84 in Sagarin, 81 in FPI, and I think they're 96 in SP plus. But if you look at ours, it's about 25 to 30 spots higher on virtually every ranking. So
Wow.
it's sizable. And I won't give you the full rundown, but just the point spread for SP plus, it's
Mhm.
about 8 points in Tech's favor.
Wow.
So
That is much higher than I would have thought of for a game where you got to throw the records out.
yeah, and it doesn't mean anything. Those things
Mhm.
will not mean anything when we go up, but that's just to frame it for how the seasons have gone for both teams. We have looked like the better team. And if
Yeah.
this was in Lane, we would probably be decent, like maybe a touchdown favorite, but it's not. We have to go on the road, and we've only won one game on the road. It was a nice win,
Yes.
and it just
was.
happened. But do you think they're
And
going to be waking them up early again this time?
yeah, and I think UVA, I think they're coming off of and Calandria is coming off of probably their best game of the season against Duke in terms of his performance
Yeah.
and their performance offensively, and quite frankly, it was really 2 games in a row because they had Louisville before that. They did lose that game, but it was they showed pretty well. I mean, they showed better than we did against that team. I'll tell you that much. So it
They sure did.
yeah. So and then they go kind of I'll say knock off Duke. Duke the hype is long past when Duke lost its quarterback, so that's really kind of fallen off. But it's still a solid team. But uh, I joke as we get into this, but I'm hesitant to say anything bad about this team because so far this year, every time we've like ripped on like a team like one side of the ball or the other, somehow that ends up like showing up. In particular, most recently with NC State's abysmal offense,
Right.
So
And it worked out for us playing BC's defense like that.
Yep.
Like it has worked out and it has not worked out. Just
Yes.
like every year. But
Yep.
NC State made us look a little foolish with how well they played offense. But I'm going to blame Chris Marr for that one.
I agree.
He gets paid the big bucks, so we can put that on him. But yeah, Calandria is coming off a really nice game against Duke. The game before that against Louisville was solid, and I think what was it? 377 yards passing last week, and a tremendous passer rating.
63% completion percentage on the year. That was what it brought him up to. But that in that game, I don't know what I think it was like. Might have got
like 70% or something.
70, like 72%. It was his highest completion percentage, obviously, for the year. But it was a really nice day.
It's been weird for him because when we saw him against JMU, that was the first time we really saw Calandria.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, oh wow, this kid can play. Like he should be playing for them. And he made some mistakes. He made some mistakes in the Maryland game. He ultimately got benched for Musket once Musket was healthy again. And I thought that was a mistake. I thought, you're not having a good season. He's the young kid. You should just be playing Calandria. And lo and behold, they went back to him. And if you look at his QBR for the season, It is third in the ACC.
Is it?
It's Jordan Travis, it's Drake May, and it's Calandria. Like that.
Wow.
His passer rating would be about fifth, but
Mm.
his QBR is third. And
That's
so
incredible.
it's pretty crazy how well if you just looking at the numbers comparisons between him and Jerome's, like this kid's had a much better year. Like
Yeah.
I mean, he's thrown more interceptions,
Yes.
but he's also produced a lot
a
more.
lot more. Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
and in less games, really. Like he's been on the field for less games than Drones. So he's good. And I am worried about him. He is prone to mistakes. He will take sacks. There
Mhm.
are ways that we can make it a long night for him, but objectively, he's been very good. At wide receiver is even more terrifying.
Oh no. Well, we just saw what happens when somebody really only has, and this UVA has more than one. They
Mhm.
have Malik Washington and they have Malachi Fields. So they have two good wide receivers. But Malik Washington is up for a lot of awards this year. He's got 96 receptions and 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns. So he is
1,300 yards in 11 games, man.
crazy.
He's second in the country in yards per game at
Yeah.
UVA. Like they don't even have like this like crazy good offense.
No.
I think what are they? They're 86th in yards per play, and this
Yeah.
kid's second in the country in receiving. Those two receivers combined have 2,000 yards on the year already.
Yeah.
There's a game, and maybe they're not going to get 2 games, but there's a game left. So it's been crazy, and their running backs are good too. Like they did lose Paris Jones to the unfortunate injury at Louisville, but Hollins and Kobe Pace are good back. Pace is the kid that came in from Clemson. They've got some good numbers. Hollins has 7 touchdowns. That's a decent amount of skill talent. I was not expecting that.
I don't know how their offense isn't ranked higher given the production that they've gotten from that quarterback. Granted, he hasn't played as many games. And with 2 wide receivers, and then their running backs are not exceptional. We have faced tougher running backs
That's
throughout
true,
this
yeah.
season, but they're good. They're not bad. They're not like, bottom dwellers, but they're not elite, but they're really good, solid, running backs. This is an anomaly that I have no idea, and I would love to know statistically how it's possible that their offense isn't actually better than it is.
I'll tell you. I'll try to explain it in 2 different ways. One, their offensive line isn't good. They're 123rd in yards per rush, 126th in TFL allowed, and 118th in sacks allowed.
Yeah.
And on third down, they're 103rd. Now, I think we're worse than them, but they are also not a good third down team. So that will hinder your overall output. When I look at the overall offense, that 123 yards per rush stands out. That has been a weak point for us, is the rushing defense. This team, not the best rushing team. I'm more worried again about the quarterback running. Like I was with Brennan Armstrong, I'm worried about Calandria's running ability because he has shown that wiggle, that burst of speed, that juking ability to make plays. So that's what worries me. Honestly, Malik is number 1.
Yeah.
Calandria running is number 2. And so number 3 would be just him distributing the ball well. But we have to put pressure on this kid. We have to take advantage of this offensive line and put some pressure on him.
Yeah, I would agree. And the only team that's had any success at shutting down Malik Washington this year is Tennessee. So they held him to 30 yards on 4 catches in that game. That was also the first game of the season.
It was early, yeah.
That doesn't mean anything. And then he went and ripped off 120, 140, 170, 100, 112, 115. He's had over 100 in every game except the BC since then. It's wild.
Ollie Gordon from Oklahoma State, the running back who's been like blowing up in the South Alabama game that they lost.
Mm-hmm.
He had like 18 yards. Mm-hmm. And ever since then, he's been running for like 200 yards a game. Like those early games, sometimes you haven't figured out your offense yet. And so Malik is going to get catches and yards. We got to hope Dorian is up to the challenge. We got to hope if Canteen's playing safety, that means we've got our corners out there, Delane and Dorian, trying to do their thing against these guys. I'm hoping we can get some of our safeties back.
Yeah.
For multiple reasons.
Yeah. And I would say equally as frightening is that it's the fact that Malachi Fields has also been consistent in every single game. He had one bad game that was against UNC where he had one catch for 13 yards.
Okay.
Every other game, he's been consistently between 60 and 85 yards. So like they are both like together, they are consistently 200 yards between those two almost every single game, that's nuts.
Yeah, that is.
So, yeah.
All right. This is making me too nervous. Let's move to the defense. Let's talk about something that's a little bit more palatable, okay? Because this defense is 90th in yards per play. And it's honestly been a disappointment if you go into the projections on the year, because they had a pretty good defense last year, despite not being a very good team. They were 20th in yards per play a year ago, and now they're 90th. They're 111th in scoring, 117th, and this is the best one, 117th in yards per rush allowed.
Wow.
That is huge for a team of Virginia Tech that needs to establish the run. So that's a huge positive. They're giving up 178 yards per game on the ground. They are better against the pass, about 60th in pass efficiency allowed, but no sacks. 132nd in sacks, Robbie. There's 133 teams. They have not generated sacks. They have not generated tackles for loss.
Yeah, 11 sacks on the year. That is not a lot. So
one a game.
Well, one per game is not great. They have 8 interceptions, and then their turnover ratio, I think, is like minus 0.5 or something along those lines. So a very bad turnover ratio as well, because they only have five fumble recoveries. So not a havoc creating team. And honestly, I don't know how the defense, like you said, they had a really good defense last year. And I just don't understand what ended up happening and how things fell off so dramatically from one year to the next.
And this I don't have a good answer for, because they brought back essentially their entire defensive line. It was full of seniors: Cam Butler, Carter, Famoy, Bennett. And overall, like you said, the turnover thing, it's 107th in turnover margin. They're not creating the havoc that leads to a ton of turnovers on the DL. And they're getting run all over.
Yep.
The linebackers seem okay too. So all of this is like it's a little confounding, but you have to keep in mind when you have a team that's bad like this, that's down like this, that's having other teams run a lot of plays, like you can rack up tackles and statistics and still not be a good defense. But James Jackson, he's second on the team in tackles. He's their stud linebacker, 6 hurries. I don't know if he's a stud. He's okay. Like he's probably an okay linebacker. But Cam Robinson, I think, is the bright spot. Like he's a freshman, 4.5 tackles for loss, 4 hurries, 2 interceptions. Like for a freshman, that's good. Like he seems to be the hope for them in the future. They could really use Nick Jackson, the kid that was on the team last year. I think he transferred to Iowa. But it's just not a very good defense. The best player on this team, well, who's the best player on the defense?
The best player on this defense, I don't know if I would. Maybe Cam, or probably Sanker, right? Their safety, I think, is pretty good.
I'd probably say Sanker. Because he's been around.
And he's got 10. I mean, he's got 10 passes defended. The next highest on the team is 5 amongst them. And granted, so let's stray away from like tackles, because to your point, right? The tackle numbers, you almost can have more tackles just by being a shitty team than anything else. That's like, you haven't really pad your stats. Passes defended, I think, is a legit statistic, but he doesn't have any interceptions, right? So he hasn't been creating much havoc. So I would probably go with him, or maybe Cam.
Those are probably the two. Like you could say Famoy, like he has 3 pass breakups as a lineman, 3 hurries, and 6.5 tackles for loss, and he is also a senior. Sanker's been around forever. leads the team. He has 65 solo tackles. And that to me, when you putting up those kind of solo numbers, like that's impressive. And you said the thing about the pass breakups, 3 forced fumbles, no interceptions, but he does have 3 forced fumbles. So Sanker, I think, is their number one guy at safety. So that's someone to look out for. But we've shown to have weapons, whether it's our wide receivers, Gosnell and Felton and Lane, or even Daquan Wright getting in there and making plays. Like, I know their pass defense is better than the rush defense. So hopefully we're only using our pass game in the auxiliary, and that's when we're at our best.
You look at that NC State game, it was not the passing that got us into really hot water in that game. It was our inability to establish the run. When this Virginia Tech team is, and I know this is not the most enlightening thing to say, but it holds very, very true for Virginia Tech, unfortunately, because there are teams out there that can rely on their pass. We are not one, and we have never been one. But when the run is going well and Tootin is getting the ball and he can get spelled by Malachi, then this team is usually good. It's in good shape on the offensive side. And the pass, we've had games where Drones has been, not good or not great. And we've told him, or we've said, like, he's still developing. It's very early. And we've played fine in those games offensively when Tootin and Malachi are getting the ball and the offensive line is creating something, not like big holes, but creating something to keep them and give them, some space to make them cut or make a move or make somebody miss.
Without a doubt, dude. I agree with all that stuff. And the one thing that's working in our favor, we talked about our safeties or DBs being banged up. They have a banged up DB in Cohen King. He has been pretty good this year. 4th on the team in tackles, a bunch of pass breakups. He's out. And so, and they lost another guy, Clary, earlier in the year, another back end guy. So this is the last game of the year. Teams are banged up. You're going out there. You're trying to see what you can do with all hands on deck. And if I'm doing this as a keys to the game kind of thing, we need to feed Bayshal Tootin in this game. It's him. Run Drones into the ground, run Tootin into the ground. It's potentially the last freaking game of the year. And if nothing else, it's the last game until several weeks later when we go to a bowl. So freaking run the ball, open up the pass, and we should be able to move the ball and get some points. It's funny because when we talked about this game in the summer, I thought we'd be seeing their backup QB. I didn't think Musket would make it through the year. I wrote that down. But I thought it would be Wolfpack. I didn't even know who Calandria was.
Well, there you go. I guess. I guess we're about to find out. So three quarterbacks. We ended up getting one of them, but neither of the two you ever really thought we would expect. And it's strange. Our opponents have been flipping a lot of kind of quarterbacks. We just saw Brennan after he got benched and then he came back in and all those sorts of things. And it's, in some ways it makes me uncomfortable because I'd rather have more film on a guy over the course of the year, even though that means more reps for him rather than coming in and having somebody that, hasn't been playing every game, but that's just my preference.
I think the skill talent on UVA it's pretty good. Honestly, it's pretty good. It might be better than ours, or at least on the very same level, because we've said throughout the year that the guys we brought in the portal, without them, I don't know where we'd be, because they accounted for most of our touchdowns this year. Yeah. I think UVA is pretty much on our level with the amount of running backs and wide receivers that can make plays. But their O-line is terrible. We're very similar teams. Like, we both have dynamic quarterbacks, both have terrible O-lines, both have pretty good skill talent. It's weird, right? But our defense, from an overall number standpoint, is significantly better. Yeah, it's significantly better. And so as an overall team, we should be able to shut them down. We need to stuff Calandria in a freaking locker. That's what we need to do. We need to hit him, make him feel pain, force him into mistakes, get a turnover or two. He has shown to give away the ball. Yep. We have to make him give away the ball. If we get 1 or 2 turnovers, we're going to win this game.
Yep.
Final thoughts?
Beat UVA. Keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid, as they say. No, I agree with all of that. And I mostly, the biggest takeaway for me is we just got to get Tootin rolling. If we can get Tootin rolling, we'll be fine, I think, in this game. I think the defense is going to want to show up after that mess that was last week.
Yeah.
And I think that they have shown a propensity to bounce back from bad games all season and come back and put a good performance on the field. And I think they will do so again this week. Whether or not we plan to feed the ball to Tootin and give it to him enough is a question mark that I don't think you and I can really take a guess at. That really comes down to what we end up scheming that day.
I'm very curious as to how Pry handles his first Commonwealth Cup.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot. You have to find a way to make it more important than another game with the way you motivate, with the way you get them ready for game time. But fortunately for us, Tony Elliott's going through the exact same thing. Both of these coaches, it's their first Commonwealth clash and Commonwealth Cup. So it's it'll be interesting. I think Pry's up to the challenge. I think he has shown he went to high school in Virginia. All he does is talk about recruiting the state. I think he values it even more than Tony Elliott does from my maroon and orange classes side of it. So I think he will have us focused and ready to play and make sure the players know how important this game is.
I think what's also interesting about Pry is you talk about handling his first Commonwealth Cup. He comes from a school that doesn't really have a rivalry like this in Penn State. So Penn State doesn't really, like Maryland is a rival of theirs, but like their biggest rival is Ohio State, and Ohio State doesn't think of Penn State as a rival, right? They don't have a year-end clash in Ohio State, Michigan, Oklahoma.
That's a really
Oklahoma
good point.
State. It's Penn State doesn't have that. That's actually one of the things that, kind of that school lacks and has been trying to get back with like the Pitt game. That's why they've started rescheduling that and the WVU game and things like that, because so it's got to be kind of exciting for him to have this level of, energy around a singular game in which, a lot of people can look at the season and say, we got to 6 wins and we beat UVA. That's a successful season. Whereas if you get to 6 wins and you lose against UVA, somebody might be turning around saying, we made it to a bowl, but I would have rather beat UVA.
It's also funny because before Penn State, Franklin and Pry were at Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Another team that doesn't really have a rivalry game. Whereas Tony Elliott was at Clemson, who has a big rivalry with South Carolina.
Yeah.
We're kind of stretching here, but it's an interesting point that you bring up.
I'm not thinking about it game theory wise. It's just interesting for Pry going into the game. It's just kind of
absolutely,
it's an interesting talking line to that. And to, the point was, what's his energy going to be like for the game? I think that's part of it. This is the first time kind of for him in a while.
One thing we know about Pry, and some people can see it as a detriment, like he's great in front of a microphone, but maybe he doesn't always bring the results. He is great at talking. Pry is very good and skilled at choosing words and presenting topics verbally. Something that it took both of us a little while to get the hang of.
It's very articulate, that's for sure.
So I think he will find a way to communicate what he needs to these players. The line on the game is Virginia Tech -3. It was 2.5, I think, yesterday. I just saw a little bit ago. It was VT -3 on the road. So I'm never going to argue with being a favorite. I'm okay with that. Let's move to our other games for picks. We talked a little bit about the Ohio State-Michigan game. Michigan, 3.5-point favorites in the Big House. What are you thinking on this one, Rob? You taking the hook, or are you laying them?
I'm laying the points.
You still believe in Big Blue?
Yeah. I think I do.
That's where I was a couple days ago, is that I was like, I still think at the end of the day, like McCord is going to struggle against this defense. And I believe it was Tom Fernelli pointed out, like last year, the week before the Michigan-Ohio State game, Michigan struggled with Illinois.
Hmm.
And Illinois was a better team than this Maryland team, but it was
Yeah.
on the road. It's a Big Ten game. It's a look ahead spot. They don't have their coach. So I'm going to forgive them for it. And
Yep.
I'm going to go with what I've been thinking all year. I'm going to go with Michigan to cover as well. UK at Louisville. Louisville, 6.5-point favorites in a game that has been tough for them over the last decade or so. They seem to have struggled with Kentucky. What are you doing here?
I don't think they're going to struggle this year. So I think
Oh.
they'll win this game by 10 points. No, I think they're going to manage to suffocate UK a bit with that defense.
Yeah, my first inclination was to take UK because it's like, okay, rivalry, UK's been owning them. But they're a little bit of a mess right now.
Yeah.
And Louisville's got a lot on the line. In their eyes, they still have a shot at the playoff. And I think the Pitt loss kind of eliminates them.
Yeah.
But in their eyes, they still have a shot at the playoff. And so I'm going to take Louisville as well. Alabama at Auburn, the Iron Bowl, 14.5-point underdogs. Are the Tigers at home? And I'll go first this time. I'm taking Auburn.
Me as well. They did just take that loss
That was such a bad
New
loss.
Mexico State. How does that happen? They steamroll first of all, they steamroll Mississippi State, okay, Vanderbilt, okay. They steamroll Arkansas, which is a halfway decent team, right? Like 48-10, and then you turn around and then you have the New Mexico State, you lose 31-10. It's just anyway.
They were looking ahead. They're not that great to be able to overlook an opponent and play well. And they overlooked New Mexico State without a doubt. That's what happened.
I used to always think the look ahead was a bunch of BS until I started paying attention to post-game conferences. And then you hear players and they say, yeah, they'll be honest. They're not just like making up excuses. And they'll be like, yeah, we were really thinking about the game ahead. And I was like, holy shit, even at this level of football, these people are like looking ahead to the following week. And it's like, dude, keep your eye. Like you see what happens every week. Anyway, I'm going with Auburn.
Arizona at Arizona State. The duel in the desert. Arizona State, 12.5-point underdogs at home. Man, this is another one where I want to take the home dog. Arizona has been so good. They have had such a promising season. But 12.5 in a rivalry game for a team like ASU that has been fighting, I'm going to take ASU.
Yeah. I'm going to go ASU as well. The party school is going to bring it.
They're both party schools.
That's their both. ASU is a different level now, but
that's true. That's true.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I hope hopefully nobody hears that. You know, they'll probably get like pissed off about that. Which one's a big party school? Which one isn't?
It's so funny to think about that. Jaden Daniels, who's potentially going to win the Heisman, was an Arizona State quarterback just a few years ago, throwing touchdown passes to Brandon Ayuk, who's on the 49ers. Like it's like that's how long Jaden Daniels has been in school.
Oh my gosh.
Washington State at Washington, the Apple Cup.
Apple Cup.
Washington is at home, and they are 17.5-point favorites. So we got a home favorite here, similar to Michigan, the undefeated team at home. Wazoo got a big win over Colorado last week. They put the smack down. Do we get a little Apple Cup crazy here?
I'm going Washington State. And the reason is
I'm going Cougs.
The reason is one, that's too many points. And two, if I pick Washington to blow out Washington State, there's a good chance they're going to lose the game outright in some Apple Cup craziness. And then like, I'm really dead in the water on this whole, this Washington gig I've been on all season. So.
Yeah. And I don't have like the Egg Bowl on here because it wasn't, I don't think it was in the list, but the last game I have it here to pick is Florida State at Florida. I love the Egg Bowl, and it's always on Thanksgiving night, correct?
Yeah.
So like it's one of the few games that comes on and that Thursday and Friday. Florida State at Florida, though. Florida, 6.5-point underdogs, another home dog. Florida State, without their quarterback, they're going to have Tate Rodemaker behind center.
Mm-hmm.
Man, this is one of those. I feel like Florida State. Like, what do you think? How different do you think the line is with Travis?
So that's what I was literally about to ask you that exact same question. I think that this is like a 12.5 point spread with him in the game. I think he's probably good for 6 points. So I'm still going to take Florida State here just because there's so much talent on that
Yeah.
team. And I think they can still do it.
The Swamp is a very tough place to win.
Yeah.
And no, Florida's not having a great season, and other teams go in there and win. But I'm trying to envision the game, and I'm like, am I going to be regretting me taking Florida State like 2 quarters into this thing when Florida's up by 10 points?
And you're like, Travis was out. Of course I should.
Right, exactly.
Like it was just like a no brainer. Right?
It's funny how that always happens when you're like, you figure out exactly what you should have done a quarter into the game. I think the studs on the D line for Florida State will be too much because you have to also remember Mertz is out.
Yeah,
for Florida.
Exactly.
So
yes.
I'm taking FSU.
Both teams are limping into this thing.
Yeah. And one of them has been much, much better all season long. So
and
that'll do it.
And well-rounded.
Yes. Yeah. They've got talent all over the field. Rodemaker is coming in and he's got like a sick receiving core. Hopefully the center for Florida State is back because he's questionable right now. But either way, good episode. It is hate week. I am so ready to watch this game. I want to get this win so badly. We had the tweet from Hokie Hangover that came out earlier in the week that was, if we beat UVA and go to a bowl, is this a successful season? And if we lose, is it not? Basically, like if we go 5-7, is it a failure?
Yeah.
And it got so much talk on Twitter, on chats, all kinds of stuff. People were mentioning and talking about it, like what's the definition of failure, blah blah blah. I put out my 2 cents on it, but let's make it irrelevant.
Yeah.
let's just make it irrelevant because I don't want anyone to say that a season in which we find a quarterback and are recruiting a little bit better, got guys out of the portal that are pretty darn good.
Show some depth in wide receiver.
Right. We turn things around. The offense seems to have found something. Like, that shouldn't be a failure. But leave no doubt. Go out there, beat UVA, say we beat our rival. We're going to a bowl in year 2. You can't call it a failure. Let's do that. Let's make that the final chapter in this story, because ending the season last year with the win over Liberty, for as bad as last year went, felt really good.
Yep.
So let's end this regular season with a win over a different in-state team. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the podcast, Apple, Spotify, all those places. And also, I have said, Hate Week is subscriber week for the Sons of Saturday YouTube channel. All of Robbie and I's podcasts, all of the College Football Mondays, all of Billy's stuff, all of Mike McDaniel and Ed's stuff, all of it goes to the YouTube channel. You can't miss it. You're going to get so much content if you're subscribed. So please subscribe. And you can hit us on Twitter. It's at 2deepvt. Make sure you're following us on there. 2deepvt@gmail.com if you want to send us anything. And until next time, when we are celebrating being bowl eligible and Robbie's fish is swimming, living life,
doing
just
laps
all around the bowl. Go Hokies.